Thank you for joining me for this wonderful JLI class. Thank you to JLI for making these incredible classes available to people all over the world. We're truly fortunate to have organizations like JLI who make Torah study available to every person. Two men were traveling on a bus. The older gentleman, being curious, asked the younger gentleman, "What do you do for a living?" The young man replied, "I help women in boosting their self-esteem." The older guy was now impressed and said, "Great, wow. What do you do? Do you run a nonprofit for women's empowerment?" And the young man smiled and said, "No, sir. I like the selfies posted by girls on Facebook." We are 10 days away from the most awesome Jewish holiday, the holiday of Shavuot, the holiday on which we receive the Torah, which occurs on the 6th and the 7th day of the Jewish month of Sivan. These days correspond this year to Friday, May 29th, and Shabbat, May 30th. Shavuot is the holiday in which we receive the Torah, and ultimately the holiday on which we became the Jewish nation. Up until we received the Torah, we were referred to as the children of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob, Rachel and Leah, or as the Israelites. But when we received the Torah, we became the Jewish nation. On the holiday of Shavuot, the holiday when we receive this most precious gift, the Torah, which is our eternal gift for life, what did God instruct Moshe to do? He said the following verse, Ko tomar lebeit Yaakov v'tagid lebnei Yisrael. So shall you say to the house of Jacob, and so shall you tell the children of Israel. The Torah is very concise. Every single word is measured and counted. But the verse seems repetitive. Rashi, a commentary on the Torah, stops and says, what does this mean? Beit Yaakov, the house of Yaakov, the house of Jacob, Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, aren't they the same? Apparently not, because if it says both of them in the same sentence as separate entities, it must be that it's referring to two different things or two different people. And Rashi explains that Beit Yaakov is referring to the women and Bnei Yisrael is referring to the men. So Ko tomar lebeit Yaakov, so shall you say to the women, the Tagid Livnei Yisrael, and say to the men. So first tell the women about the Torah and then tell the men about the Torah. Very interesting. The commentaries that Rashi brings also explain that it uses two different expressions for saying. It says, so shall you tell and so shall you say. Tomar and Tagid are both expressions of saying, telling. Why does the verse use two different expressions? It says when you speak to the women, speak to them b'lashon raka, in a soft tone, and when you speak to the men, speak to them in a harsh tone. Very interesting. And it brings another commentary that says, when you speak to the women, you tell them the general fundamental concepts. When you speak to the men in a harsh tone, and you tell them the details and the punishments. Very interesting. It reminds me of my, a time that I can remember my children discussing sleepaway camp. And a number of my kids have gone to sleepaway camp, and they were discussing the first day of sleepaway camp, what it's like. And my son Mendel said that first day of camp, the head counselors gather you in the main room and they scare you. They tell you what's going to happen if you don't listen or if you misbehave, and you might get kicked out of camp. And they really try to, make you feel a little intimidated. And my daughter said, really? Not in our camp, not in the girls' sleepaway camp. Quite the opposite. They get you all pumped. They get you excited about how amazing camp is. Yes, they say the rules, but it's more about how exciting camp is going to be. And it made me think of way back. God already then said, speak to the women in a soft tone and the men in a harsh tone. The men say the details and the punishments, the women, the general fundamental concept. And this was apparently happening in their sleepaway camp. So based on reading all these commentaries, we see that there were three differences. The women were told first about the Torah. The women were told in a soft tone, whereas the men were told in a harsh tone. And the women were told the general concepts, whereas the men were told the details and the punishments. So let's talk about each of these differences. The women were told the Torah first. Why were they told about the Torah first? Rashi brings a commentary that says because the women would be quick, they would be eager to accept the mitzvot. And we know that Judaism stresses that women are the ones that will be responsible for the continuity of the Torah, for making sure that the children keep the Torah, and therefore God wanted the women to be given the Torah first. Why the women in a soft tone, in a gentle tone, and the men in a harsh tone? It says because women would easily accept it. They would accept it right away, whereas the men, in order for them to accept it, would need to be told in a harsh way. The women were told the general concepts and the men the details of the punishments. Why? The women were told the general concept says because women have greater emunah, greater faith, and women have greater yirat shamayim, fear of God, and therefore just being told the general concepts, they would abide by everything. But the men, in order for them to abide, they would need to be told the details and the punishments. So we see three significant differences that we learn just from this verse. Very interesting. A number of years ago, Robert Abrams, the borough president of the Bronx and the district attorney of the state of New York, came with his wife Diane to see the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe, world leader of blessed memory. And many important people would come to Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he came to the Rebbe to discuss certain things. And the Rebbe was discussing political and economic issues with him, while his wife Diane, who was an accomplished attorney herself, just sat quietly because she thought that the Rebbe only wanted to converse with her husband. And after a while, the Rebbe turned to her and said, aren't you going to say anything? These are the days of women's liberation. The Lubavitcher Rebbe always stressed the greatness of women and the significance that women play in Judaism. And so did his predecessor, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. Judaism stresses that women are the Akeret Habayit, the foundation of the home. And we know that the foundation of the home is most important. That's what the home stands on. And if there isn't a strong foundation, it'll crumble. But if there's a strong foundation, the home will be strong. And that's what Judaism says. Women are the Akeret Habayit. The home rests upon them. They are so important. And this makes our responsibility so great. Because when we realize that the Torah was given to women first, and that in the merit of women, the Jewish nation merited to receive the Torah, we know that we have a great mission and a great task ahead of us. And that we know that God does not give us any strength. God does not give us any mission for which we are not able to handle it, right? There's a saying that says, God doesn't give you more than you can handle. In fact, I remember one Rosh Hashanah, after services, a woman came over to me and she said, in a questioning tone, you know, they say that God doesn't give you more than you can handle. And I said, yeah, I've heard that. And she says, well, I think he overestimated me. And I laughed, and that line always remained with me. But in truth, God does not overestimate us. He knows what we as women are capable of. And if he instructs us with the Torah first and says that women are the Akeret Habayit, that means we have the strength to fulfill and utilize all the qualities that he gave us. Now, it's interesting, not only when God gave the Torah were women given precedence over men, but in numerous places in the Torah, we see that women were first. There's another instance in the desert when the Jews were building the first ever Mishkan, the tabernacle, the portable sanctuary in the desert. In a way, it was like the first synagogue ever, with no membership and for all Jews. Imagine that. And it says that the women were very excited to contribute to this. And the verse says, and the men accompanied the women. And the Ramban explains that the women were so eager to donate to the holy sanctuary, to the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary in the desert, that they were rushing and the men went after them. And they donated their precious jewelry. Now, we know that's not so easy. Would you give your jewelry? These women were incredible. They were so eager to build this holy Mishkan, the sanctuary, and they were there first in line to give their jewelry with the men following after them. Interestingly, when it came to the golden calf, the women were not first. Not only were they not first, they said no, they did not participate in contributing their jewelry to the golden calf. Let me give you some background. When God gave the Jewish people the Torah, he said the 10 commandments. And after that, Moshe, went up on the mountain for 40 days to receive the physical luchot, the actual tablets. Now, the Jews counted the day that Moshe went up as the first day, which was miscalculation on their part. So on the 39th day, they were already panicking. What's happening? How are we going to be without Moshe? Moshe is not coming down. And they were very dependent on Moshe. Moshe had led them out of Egypt. Moshe was the one who was, performing the plagues. And so they were very nervous. And they went to his brother Aaron and they said, help us make this golden calf. And they wanted to give their jewelry. And we know that the women said, no, they don't want to give their jewelry for such a thing. And as we know the story, Moshe came down on the mountain and saw the Jews dancing in front of the golden calf, and he shattered the tablets. Torah tells us that it was a grave sin, and God was very upset with the Jewish people. But because the women did not participate in contributing to the sin of the golden calf, they didn't want to give their jewelry. In honor of that, God gave us a mini Jewish holiday every month in the merit of Jewish women. And that is Rosh Chodesh, Rosh being head, Chodesh being month. The first day of every Jewish month is a mini Jewish holiday. On Rosh Chodesh, we say special prayers, like we say Hallel. We read the Torah in the synagogue. We are not supposed to do laundry, hopefully to give women a break on Rosh Chodesh. So we see that the women knew when to rush to be first by contributing their jewelry to the building of the Mishkan, and they knew when to say no and not to participate. Interestingly, when we look at the outward appearance, women and men, we see a big difference in what Judaism teaches us. We know that men wear a kippah on their head, and they wear tzitzit, a four-cornered garment with the fringes in the corners, but women do not. And the question is why? In order to understand that, we have to know why do men wear a kippah and tzitzit, and then we could understand. So men wear a kippah, which is the covering on their head. It's also, a kippah is also called yarmulke. Yarmulke is comprised of two words, yare and malka, fear of God. Men wear a kippah on their head to remind them that God is always above them, to remind them about the fear of God, that God is always over them. Tzitzit, the four-cornered garment, why do they wear that? In the Hebrew alphabet, in the Aleph-Bet, every letter has a numerical value. Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Gimel is 3, etc. The word tzitzit equals 600, plus 5 knots and 8 fringes equals 613. So the four-cornered garment, the tzitzit, is there to remind them every day of the 613 mitzvot, the 613 commandments that God gave us. So this is beautiful, wearing a kippah to remind them that God is above them, the tzitzit to remind them of the 613 mitzvot. What about women? And our sages tell us that women are more spiritual in nature. Spirituality comes more natural for them, and they don't need these daily reminders every second to remind them that someone's above them. For them, it's more natural to remember that. And therefore, they don't have to wear a kippah and tzitzit. So wow, it's really important for us to know our worth. We need to know how valued we are and to appreciate these differences. It reminds me of a story. Little Avi came home from school one day and his mother said, "How was school, Avi?" And he said, "It was good, but you know what? I'm really upset. Every single day, Yoni gets taken out of math class. And when he comes back, he has a smile on his face and a lollipop. And it's not fair. Why am I not taken out of math class?" And his mother said, "Avi, don't you understand? Yoni needs help in math. So Yoni is taken out so he can be tutored in math. And because his efforts are valued and appreciated, to show him how well he does, his tutor gives him a lollipop. You, Avi, excel in math. You do so well. You don't need that extra help." Wow. So it's really important that we know our values, our significance. It's interesting. It reminds me of a story. The mayor of a small Israeli town was once taking a walk, and he passed a construction site. And he was walking with his wife, Eliza. They passed the construction site, and suddenly one of the construction workers called out, "Eliza, how are you?" And she started talking to him. And after they finished talking, they walked away. And the mayor turned to his wife and he said, "How do you know this man?" And she said, "Oh, when we were younger, he wanted to marry me." And the mayor said, "Wow, aren't you lucky? If you would have married him, you would be the wife of a construction worker." And she said, "No, not at all. If I would have married him, he would have been the mayor." Jewish women have always been and played a pivotal role in Jewish history. We've been the backbone of every Jewish event. As Jewish women, God has endowed us with special qualities and special traits, and it's important for us to be cognizant of that. The Torah teaches us that girls become responsible for all the mitzvot at age 12. Boys become responsible for all the mitzvot, all the commandments in the Torah at age 13. Therefore, a girl becomes bat mitzvah, literally daughter of commandments, at age 12, and a boy becomes bar mitzvah, literally son of commandments, at age 13. So a girl becomes responsible for keeping the whole Torah a year earlier than boys. Why is that? Because girls tend to mature earlier in every way, physically, emotionally, and mentally. And if you're a parent of both genders, I'm sure you would agree with me. So these specific instances of the women giving precedence by the giving of the Torah, the women being first to contribute to the Mishkan, to the holy sanctuary in the desert, the women refusing to participate in the sin of the golden calf, all of these show us that women have significant qualities. And as we mentioned, women not being required to wear kippah and tzitzit, women becoming responsible for Torah a year earlier than men, teaches us something very significant. You know, people like to say men are from Mars, women are from Venus, but really, no, it's women are from the first batch at Sinai and men are from the second batch. The women were able to really show their strength throughout their time in the desert. And because of their spiritual quality, they were able to overcome many challenges. It's interesting that the spiritual women of nature has impacted all the generations. There's a saying that says, "B'zchut nashim tzidkaniyot nigalu avotenu b'Mitzrayim, u'b'zchut nashim tzidkaniyot asidin lehigael." In the merit of righteous women, we were redeemed from exile. And in the future, we'll be redeemed in the merit of righteous women. So we were redeemed from exile in Egypt because of righteous women. And today in our days, we're going to be redeemed from this exile because of righteous women. The Arizal, a famous Kabbalist, said that the souls of the generation of Mashiach, this generation, are the reincarnation of the very souls from the people in Egypt, from the women that went out of Egypt. So no wonder we're all so stressed and tired all the time. I think it's a hangover from the slavery in Egypt. So thus, the women of the generation, of our generation, in whose merit we are going to be liberated, is the same souls in whose merit we left Egypt. And I think this is why the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory focused on the women, because he understood the significance and the importance of women, and women being the catalyst of change. And through empowering the women, we are going to bring the redemption, which is the coming of Mashiach. It's interesting. When I was growing up, I grew up in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, and I grew up with Lubavitcher Rebbe. Lubavitcher Rebbe was an inspiration to me and my husband. And when I was growing up, even at that time, the Rebbe used to give a special talk just for women. I was only a young girl at the time, but I remember that it made an impression on me that he took the time every year to address the women. And this is because the Rebbe truly realized the importance of women, and he encouraged the women to be involved in their communities and to make a difference. In fact, when my husband and I moved out to start our Chabad house here in Miami, more than 20 years ago, we picked ourselves up, not knowing a soul. And what gave us an inspiration was Lubavitcher Rebbe. And particularly for me personally, to be involved in my community, that inspiration came from the Rebbe, because the Rebbe always inspired women to be involved. And today, thousands of Chabad couples, shluchim, all over the world, the men and women are both involved in their community. And the women in particular, many of them are mothers of very large families. And at the same time, they're running Hebrew schools and preschools and day schools and friendship circles and giving classes. And some of these and many of these all at the same time. And really, what gives us the strength is Lubavitcher Rebbe, because he really noticed the strength of women and encouraged women to utilize that strength, especially as we come closer to the era of redemption, when it says that the strength and the qualities of women are going to be revealed. So I'd like to conclude with a story. There was once a man who approached a rabbi and he said, Rabbi, I would like you to make me a Kohen. And the rabbi said, I'm sorry, but I can't make you a Kohen. And the man said, please, I'll give you a donation of $10,000. And the rabbi said, I'm sorry, but I can't. And the man said, I'll give you a donation of $25,000. And the rabbi looked at him in amazement and said, why do you want to be a Kohen so badly? And the man said, well, my father was a Kohen, my grandfather was a Kohen, my great-grandfather was a Kohen. Sometimes we're not aware of our inherent qualities and our God-given traits and our strengths. Let's remember our special qualities. This year on the holiday of Shavuot, let's remember who God gave the Torah to first and why he gave the Torah to us first. Let's make sure to live up to that incredible strength and power. Thank you for joining me today.